All right, so over the years, there have been a number of policy and program interventions to encourage girls' participation in education. One of the major interventions we have had was the establishment of the Girls' Education Unit in 1997 as part of GES, with the sole responsibility of promoting girls' education. Within 2 years of its establishment, the unit came out with national vision for girls' education and a framework for action on how to ensure we address the gender disparity in our education system. That has actually helped in addressing some of the gaps that we've had in girls' education over the years. Other interventions included the National Send Your Girl Child to School campaign. I know if you were to cast your mind back those days, radio, and especially radio, I've seen a lot of adverts on sending the girl child to school. And then also the Discovery Project, Stop Violence Against Girls in School project, and then the Strategic Approach to Girls Education, which has one of its phase ended just recently, I think last year. All right, so this intervention has actually helped in closing the gender disparity we had over the years. So the good news is that we have attained gender parity within our basic education system. If you look at the last 8 years, there is parity that has been achieved. The ratio of boys to girls, as far as the EMIS data is concerned, is 1, which means we have closed the disparity gap since the last 8 years. And the good news is also that among the Sub-Saharan African countries, Ghana is placing 7th as far as promoting girls' participation in education is concerned, or when we look at gender parity attainment, with an average score of 61%. Notwithstanding, there are outstanding issues to girls' full participation. Although we have closed the gap, there are outstanding issues that we still need to address to ensure that they are not just in school, but they are in school and remaining in school, transitioning to the upper level and attaining learning progress. So what are some of the issues? If you look at the 2021 EMIS data, the national GSS completion rate is 77%, which means in that particular year, about 23% of girls that enrolled in that academic year at GSS 1 did not complete their junior high school. Also, when we look at JSS, SHS transition, while you have realized that, yes, parity had been attained at the junior high school level, when you move to the SHS level, a good number of girls are not transitioning from GSS to SHS. And the EMIS data for 2022 suggests that the rate is 0.8, which means that for every 100 boys enrolled, we have our 83 girls enrolled. So at the SHS level, we are seeing disparity, although parity had been attained at the junior high school level. UNICEF in 2019 also informed us that if you take the average year of basic education, which is 10.9 years, the average years that boys spend in school is 8.1 years compared to 6.6 years for girls. Meaning boys are more likely to remain in school compared to girls. And then also in terms of participation in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, we've seen that a good number of girls compared to boys are not participating in STEM programs. The 2020 data, EMIS data, inform us that related to STEM programs, 122,000 plus boys are enrolled in STEM program compared to 69,000 plus girls. What are some of the factors affecting girls' full participation in basic education? We have the socioeconomic factors as well as the school-related factors. These factors are well known to you as far as the socioeconomic factors and school factors are concerned. But just to mention a few, for the socioeconomic factors, look at issues of sexual and gender-based violence, child labor and domestic labor, we talk of child trafficking, and then also some traditional communities practices of prioritizing boys' education over girls' education. The school-related factors include issues of gender-unfriendly pedagogy. We still monitor classrooms and realize that some of the teachers do not promote inclusive education. You see some of them mostly throwing questions at the the boys, and then excluding the girls. Issues about gendered leadership roles. You go to some basic schools still, if they talk about the school prefect, automatically it has to be the boy, and then we reserve the girls' prefect role for the girls. And then issues of corporal punishment, despite the very fact that it has been banned in our basic school, we still see instances like that. And school-related gender-based violence also continue to be on the rise, especially sexual violence against girls. But again, as we have all discussed this morning, the infrastructure is also one of the school-related factors that is affecting girls' full participation. What is the debt situation in the country? Our board member, Madam Dorothy, already gave us the data that at the national level, I realized that 50% of KG learners are not having sitting and writing places. 40% of primary pupils are not having sitting and writing places, and the data is 30% for junior high school learners, bringing the total as of 2021 to 2.3 million Ghanaian learners not having sitting and writing places. If we want to disaggregate the data on regional level, we would realize that the situation is much worse in some regions. While the national average, we are taking just the primary, this is just the primary, while the national average of pupils not having desks at the primary level is 40%, per the graph as seen, I realize that some regions are doing so poorly. For instance, Northeast, as much as 80% of the primary pupils are not having sitting and writing places, 70% in Northern region, 60% in Upper East, 60% in Bono East, 60% in Savannah, Upper West is 50%, and OT 50%. These are the regions, 7 regions that are having their rate above the national rate of 40%. And stories upon story continue to be broadcast about the situation. Joy News is currently doing a project they call Ghana School of Shame, where they throw the limelight on some of the instances. TV3 is also doing some of the projects. Their mission project also highlights some of the challenges in our school. And if we take a case like the Bintri EA Primary School in the East Mamprusi of Northern Region, that's a classical case where we are having a total population of 800 learners, and if we are to take it on conservative rates, to say that learners are to sit 2 in 1 desk, they will need about 400 desks in the school, but in that school of 800 population, there are only 30 desks. And the very specific pictures we are having of a class of about 102 learners, they have only 2 desks in that class. How is the situation like for girls? Yes, the desk situation affects both boys and girls. We highly appreciate that. But again, the girls seem to be more disadvantaged. In our study in 2021, where we look at the impact of deprivation on enrollment using schools in OT region as case study, parents reported that because of the nature of school infrastructure, and which include the absence of desks or the lack thereof, they were unable to encourage the enrollment of their girl in school. So that study revealed that girls especially were not enrolling because of the desk situation and in general the infrastructure situation. And that could explain, if we take that particular district or municipality in Kwantasaf municipality, you realize that girls, the school-going age girls, their population is much more than that of the boys. Their population is 7,591 compared to boys that school-going age with population of 7,565. But in terms of net enrollment, the boys are enrolling more than the girls, 99.6%, which is almost 100% for the boys, compared to 89.5% for the girls, bringing us a percentage point difference of about 10. There are other studies that are pointing to the very fact that when there are lack of desks in school, girls tend to be overly self-conscious, and because they need to protect themselves so that they do not expose themselves, and by so doing, they lack concentration in class, which affect their academic performance and putting them at risk of dropping out. Other studies also pointed that in communities where sitting on a floor, especially for a menstruating girl, is discouraged or seen as a taboo, girls in their menstrual period will not go to school. And then also, it's fostered the risk of gender-based violence, for the very fact that when they are not sitting appropriately and exposing themselves, it could potentially invite any form of sexual violence from the boys or even from the teachers. What are some of the key drivers for the inadequate desks in our schools? We've noticed that there have been cases of school buildings that are completed without the associated desks provided. So contract to be awarded for school classrooms to be built, but desks will not be included as, the provision of desks will not be included as part of the contract. And we have situations like that in Pandai DA in 2018, and then 2023 we have that case in the Balia DA primary school. Yes, the local authority may have the good intention of ensuring that desks are provided before the schools are operationalized, but at times, because fund delay in providing the desks, the community also puts pressure on them to operationalize the school, even without the desks, and we end up seeing classrooms without desks. Another challenge is the low financial capacity of district assemblies to address the infrastructure challenge in our schools. The education at the pre-tertiary education has even devolved the responsibility to district assemblies to provide infrastructure, but unfortunately, that has not commensurate with their financial capacity to sufficiently address the situation. We've reviewed some policy tracks of government to understand how government intends to address the desk situation in our public basic schools. The first policy trust we reviewed was the Basic Education Infrastructure Planning and Development Policy Framework, which was put together in 2022 last year. That framework actually provided a guideline for development of infrastructure policy in our schools within the short term to give us a direction as how to address infrastructure or siting school building, what should inform the siting of school building community. All right. The shortfall in that policy framework now remain on that same page. The shortfall in that policy framework is that although the policy framework explains infrastructure to include decks, there are no specific policy action plan as to how to address the deck situation. So yes, it has infrastructure defined to include decks, but all the action plans that you see are just targeting classrooms without any specific arrangement for decks provision. The next we also review is the 2022-2025 Education Sector Medium-Term Development Plan. We just ended the first medium-term plan and ushering us, and we just began the next medium-term plan, which is in alignment with the overall education sector plan of 2018 to 2030. In that plan, if you go to the monitoring and evaluation section of the plan, you see that all indicators in the education sector are well spelled out, and then targets are given to them. For instance, by 2020, what ratio we want to get in terms of trained teachers, in terms of GSS, SHS transition, what we want to attain by 2030, which is the end line of the plan. But the medium one, end line, a recent one, is the 2025. So what we want to attain in 2025, we have a target set for the percentage of trained teachers we want in our classroom, the percentage of girls we want to transition to GSS or SHS. All the indicators are there, but sadly, we do not see indicator set explicitly telling us that the deck situations, this is how we intend to address them. This is the indicator, and this is the percentage we want to attain in the following year and then subsequent years. For classrooms, yeah, you see indicator on classroom, the number of classrooms to be provided each year till we get to 2025, and then subsequently to 2030. You see the indicator over there, and then targets set for each particular year. But for decks, we do not have. And the problem about that is that if you do not, the sector plan actually provides guidance on how resources are allocated to infrastructure and other issues in the sector. So if you do not have it within your own plan, the difficulty is that you may not end up budgeting for it to address the problem adequately. And then another challenge is that you will not give us the room to, when I said we, I mean civil society organization, to hold you accountable. Because if we want to demand accountability, we'll reference the education sector planners. Okay, within the medium term, you say by 2025, this is the percentage you seek to address the furniture deficit in our schools. And since there's nothing like that, it becomes so difficult for CSO also to hold government accountable and demand accountability from them. All right, let's look at budgetary issues to infrastructure and then furniture. Over the years, before that, we all know that GETSPAN is the main source of revenue for financing infrastructure projects in our schools. So if we want to look at the budgetary allocation to infrastructure, we go to look at the infrastructure allocation from GETSPAN to infrastructure, which includes the furniture as well. In 2021, if you look at the graph over there, the blue one depicts the infrastructure projects, and non-infrastructure projects is for the, what color is that? Orange, eh? All right. So the orange one is for non-infrastructure projects. Like I mentioned, GETSPAN is to address infrastructure projects in our school. Its main objective is not for non-infrastructure projects in our school. But in recent time, we are seeing the GETSPAN, most of the fund being shifted to non-infrastructure projects. So in 2021, for the blue one, which is the infrastructure project, the amount allocated to it increased by 331% by the year 2022. So from 2021 to 2022, the allocation to infrastructure project increased by 331%, and then the allocation to non-infrastructure projects also increased by 331%, just 1 percentage point difference. What it means is that the infrastructure project allocation and that of the non-infrastructure projects, in terms of percentage increment, they are at par. They are matching each other, which means that some level of priority or the same level of priority is being given to them by government. Yes, in 2022, of course, government has allocated much more to the infrastructure projects compared to the non-infrastructure one. But the trend reversed in 2023, where we've seen that government has allocated much more to non-infrastructure projects compared to non-infrastructure projects. 978,500 million was allocated to non-infrastructure projects compared to 383,954,000. So that is the picture. In terms of percentage, the percentage of GET fund allocation to non-infrastructure projects is 70%, roughly 70, okay, to be specific, 72%. And the one allocated to the infrastructure project is 28%. So now we are allocating as much as 72% of the GET fund, which ideally is set out for infrastructure projects. We are now allocating as high as 72% to non-infrastructure projects, leaving just a little of 28% to address the infrastructure challenges in our basic schools. What are some of the non-infrastructure projects government is now shifting the GET fund money to? The purchasing of laptops for teachers. So we all know about that policy, one teacher, one laptop. That is being financed from GET fund, which shouldn't be the case. SHS digitization project, we heard of government intention to procure tablets for every SHS student. Money has been allocated from GET fund to procure the tablet. Scholarships, textbook and whiteboard for basic schools, they're supposed to be ordinarily financed from GOG budget line, not GET fund line, and then promotion of French. These are stuff that ordinarily should have been financed from government of Ghana budget line and not the capitation, and not GET fund, because GET fund is mainly to address capital expenditure, not goods and services. So if you are now seeing GET fund, which is to address capital expenditure, going to address issues of goods and services, it means that we are not efficiently allocating the GET fund money. Now, let's look at the basic, let's focus on basic education. The allocation to basic education when it comes to infrastructure budgetary. In 2021, the amount of infrastructure budget that was sent to or allocated to basic education represented just 28%. Let us establish first of all that basic education has the major issues when it comes to infrastructure deficit. There are over 5,000 schools that are under 3 shared and dilapidated structures. There are over 20% of classrooms that need major repairs. So, and we talk of over 4,000 junior high school being lacked to promote primary to junior high school transition. So if we are allocating just 28% of the infrastructure budget to basic education, you can just imagine how ready we are to address the situation at that level. In 2022, the infrastructure budget of GET fund, only 23% was allocated to basic education, and that increased to 43% in 2023. Now, out of the infrastructure budget allocated to basic education, what's the proportion going to address the desk deficits in our school? In 2021, 20% of the infrastructure budget was allocated to address desk issues in our school. It declined in the following year, 2022, to 15%, and further declined to 9% in 2023. If you want to look at the monetary terms, you'd have seen that the allocation was 11 million in 2021, increased to 30 million in 2022, but declined again to 15 million in the year that we are in. How much is needed to address the situation? We, at a conservative rate, Africa Education would estimate that it will cost 330 million Ghana cedis to address the desk deficits in our public basic school. The over 1 million desks that are needed, it will cost government an average or a conservative rate of 330 million. However, we are currently doing 8 million annually. On average, our allocation is around 18 million. Sorry, we are doing 80 million annually. If you need 330 million to address the desk deficit and you are allocating 80 million annually, it's going to take you 19 years to finish dealing with the backlog. So we already have backlogs. It's going to take you 18 years to address the backlog. And then, aside addressing the backlog, you need to address the increase in population. And that means we need additional 90 million every year to provide 54,800 desks so that we can meet up with the growing population of students' need. All right, our budget, is it gender sensitive? We realize that the answer straight away is no, because it is more of a general budgeting without looking at it from the gender focus. If you analyze the infrastructure budget, it doesn't focus on addressing specific needs of girls or specific needs of boys. For instance, how we want to provide changing room in our schools so that girls, in terms of menstruating, they can make themselves comfortable. Our budget actually does not look at some of those specific issues. A quick recommendation: the Ministry of Education must allocate at least 70% of GET fund to infrastructure. Currently, we are doing the opposite, where 70% is going to non-infrastructures. We have to reverse it to have 70% going to infrastructure. And the Ministry of Education must prioritize infrastructure at the basic education level, so that out of the allocation, the 70% of infrastructure allocation, 50% will go into issues of or go into basic education, or go to the level of basic education. And at the allocation level of 50% to basic education, 30% should go to address the issues of desk deficits in our school. Beyond that, we realize that government alone cannot do it, so we need to look beyond government intervention. And what can be done? The Ministry of Education and District Assembly should commit to a policy of ensuring no basic school infrastructure contract is awarded without the full component of school furniture, including desks. And then also the Ministry of Education and local government must design and implement a furniture resource mobilization strategy. I think that's the main reason why we are here, to see what could be done in collaboration with the private sector, the corporate sector, and other government agencies. If we have a framework in place to mobilize resources to address the desk deficit at the local level. And finally, in the subsequent education sector plan, the medium one, there should be provision of indicators for desk provision that will ensure that resources are adequately allocated, and then also will ensure monitoring from civil society organizations. Thank you.